All right, I'm recording right now. Welcome, everybody. This is a test run of the Free Thought Project. Uh, my name is Aaron Burr, and my co-host, Blake Lincoln. Blake, you want to say hello?
Hey, everybody.
So, just to let you guys know, I'm currently podcasting from San Diego, California. And Blake, where are you at?
I am in northern Minnesota.
Northern Minnesota. All right. So, our goal with this podcast, a Free Thought Project, we're just trying to create a platform for us to discuss current events, cultural events, political events, and just stuff that's going on. Give our opinions from our perspective. Um, with that being said, I think it would be fair to give you guys uh, let you guys, be transparent in that what my views are and where I'm coming from. I'm not sitting here. I'm not a journalist. I'm not giving you this quote unquote objective analysis. I'm trying to be as objective as I can, but it's going to come from my perspective, of course. I'm not trying to be this sacred journalist or anything like that they claim to be. And so, that being said, my perspective is of the right. I hail from the right. Um, when I say that, though, I mean like right of center, center right. Um, and my main thing, my whole philosophy centers around liberty, 100% liberty, freedom of the individual. That's the basis of my belief system, and my guided principles stem from that. So I highly value things like freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of expression. So everything kind of comes out of there. And then from there, I go on to, well, that's the root, and that's like the anchor. There's certain things that I do believe and, viewpoints that I follow and express, like fiscal conservative. On economics, I definitely go along with that. Socially libertarian, I say that because that's a mixture of conservative and I have some liberal viewpoints, so you could say. Um, and then, and another, uh, what was that beeping?
Sorry.
So, guys, again, this is a test episode, so you're gonna hear some weird things, awkward moments, rough moments. Just bear with us. We're trying to learn how to do this. But to get back to what I was saying, I mean, one of my main basis things here is I do love America, right? Like, I do love this place. Like, I'm not ashamed of our history or heritage. That's not to say that I'm not aware of some of the ugly things that have happened. Like, there's definitely some ugly things that have happened. I'm not going to deny that. But I think the best part of our country is the fact that we could genuflect on that, or at least reflect on that and see, the amount of progress we've made. And in that sense, I believe that, we're the true progressives. Not in the way they use that word, but I mean we value the progress that's been made, right? And then, and there's just certain things about the American system, with our Constitution, Bill of Rights, that they protect certain rights and stuff that we have, right? Like, I'm huge on, one issue that I jump on a lot. I'm a proponent of is the Second Amendment, right? The basic right, the basic human right to self-preservation, and then from there I could go on to rights of due process and other things. Now, things I'm against are Marxism, socialism, and all forms of collectivism, right? Things that go against everything I just said, right? Um, and then one thing I want to mention before Blake goes on and explains his stuff is um, I do want to mention that despite everything I just said, I am not a doctrinaire conservative, and I'm definitely not a partisan. I'm not married to my views. I can be swayed with logic and reason on most issues. And really, although I completely despise the Democratic Party, I hate the Republican Party just as much, if not more. So I do ask this audience not to pigeonhole me into any particular corner. And one thing I believe in, the golden rule, along with I don't treat anybody differently depending on how they vote. I really don't. That's your right. Do what you do. All right. Um, and before I get into media influences and stuff like that, Blake, if you want to go ahead and explain your viewpoints and stuff.
Yeah, so I've pretty much been on the right side of most issues since I was a younger kid, and this really comes from the fact that I'm a very patriotic person. I really love our country. I think we are, no doubt, the greatest country in the world, and that's because of the individual freedoms that we've had since our founding. And even though we are not a perfect nation, we obviously have had growing pains with a lot of different things, but we've always found a way to overcome. And despite our differences and things like that, the American people have always shown such a strong resolve through hard work and just taking care of one another to the point where we always seem to overcome any obstacle that comes our way. And I think in a lot of ways, that's why I'm on the right on most issues, because it just seems a lot of the people on the left, they want to change a lot of that. It's the more progressive types. It's not really about, I don't want to come out and say that they hate America per se, but they definitely want to change the kind of country it is and who we are as a people. And I just don't agree with any of that. I'm more of a conservative when it comes to I would say fiscal issues, and then definitely more libertarian when it comes to social issues. I think really when it comes down to it, we need to have fiscal responsibility, but each person is responsible for their own successes or failures, as it says in the Bill of Rights of the Constitution. So
yeah, I definitely agree with you there for sure. Yeah.
With that being said, I'm not a big fan of the Republican Party because a lot of them are drifting away from that basic belief as well. So it's really hard, our country's at such a crossroads right now. There's so many different points of view that we've never really kind of experienced before. So it's an interesting time to be alive in the United States.
So yeah, I think one thing tell me if you would agree with this. I think you kind of said this in your own way, was that, one, basically, basically anybody's allowed, right? Anybody can do whatever they want to do, right? As long as they don't impede on the liberty and rights of anybody else. You know what I mean? And then I don't know, but the second part there, I would kind of, I see what you're saying in terms of, definitely time to be alive, and that there's these different viewpoints kind of battling each other. But I'd say they're in modern history, I think you're right. But I think in overall history, there's been a lot of,
well, yes,
and we did fight this war,
right? That's, the battle between capitalism and communism and collectivism and individuality have gone back centuries.
Agree. I would say that in our daily American life, at least in our lifetimes, and I know we're around the same age, so we're in our mid-30s.
Yeah.
Definitely these competing viewpoints where it's essentially, a form of collectivism versus, individualism is definitely a bigger fight than it's ever been that I've ever seen, and I'm probably that you've probably ever seen, right?
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think that's a whole conversation right there if you really want to get into that and why that is. But my theory for that is, the world is becoming a smaller place because of technology.
Definitely,
And, as good as technology is and how helpful it is, it can also be a curse for a lot of people.
for sure.
Um, it's a put in the wrong hands. It's a great tool to control people and
Agreed.
manipulate people, and we've got to watch how we use not just the internet but all technology, and try to remember that at the end of the day we're all humans, and we should really ask ourselves what we're doing with it is if what we're doing with it is worth the problems that may arise from it.
For sure, and we could definitely get into a huge discussion regarding technology, the internet, social media, and that is something we'll definitely be talking about in the future. But I kind of want to move on to, kind of what got us here to even, do this podcast and what's influenced us to be here. So I'll start off with just talking about different media influences I've had through the years, right? At least politically, and like I basically started listening to talk radio probably about early to mid 2000 or 2000 time range. I grew up with my dad listening to talk radio, so I'd hear that in the background. But I probably didn't get into it until I was in my low 20s, and I first got into Michael Savage, and then I got into Mark Levin and Glenn Beck. Before he turned the way he went, and then
He's seen the light since then, but that might be
yeah,
because of money
money,
problems.
yeah,
I don't
definitely.
know.
And I always used to watch on Fox Bill O'Reilly. I used to be a huge O'Reilly Factor fan for years.
Always got to do it live.
Yeah. And then going back to Mark Levin, he wrote a book, Liberty and Tyranny, and I read that book 5, 6, 7 times, and
Yeah,
that was
that's a
like,
good.
yeah, it was at the beginning of like the Obama administration,
Yep.
and then another writer before that I was thinking about before preparing this podcast that I was really into, and he wrote a really good book. It's sad though because this person's now never Trumper and he's suffering from TDS, but Jonah Goldberg, when he wrote
Oh God.
liberal fascism, though, that was it still is a great
Yeah,
book. I would recommend.
it
Right,
was great. When the Never Trumpers
but
they got
that's all post Trump.
there.
I'm still back in time before Trump, right? So I'm
Right.
still like
Yeah.
Obama administration. That was like during the Bush administration, like when I read
Right.
that book, right? And then Mark Levin's Liberty and Tyranny, I read that in Obama administration, right?
Hmm.
And then as the years went by, I kind of stuck with those people for the most part during the Obama administration. I mean, there are other things too, but I always tried to also listen to the other side, of course, right? So, and this guy could be really annoying, but Bill Maher, right? I used to listen a lot, or at least watch a show on HBO, and honestly, he
Yeah.
does speak out towards certain things that a lot of liberals don't, right?
He does.
He does, so he and still does, but I definitely have my differences with him. He's definitely a man of the left, and I don't have a problem with people of the left, but obviously we just don't disagree on certain things. With that being said, moving on, I'd say one of my biggest influencers, especially right now, and I'm not ashamed to say it, of course, is the great Rush Limbaugh, right?
You'll never be ashamed of that.
Yeah, never be ashamed of that.
Nothing to be ashamed of. That.
Nothing to be ashamed there. He's definitely, legendary in the talk radio world for sure, conservative world for sure, conservative media. And then just other people that I listen to, Buck Sexton, Matt Walsh, and then someone who hasn't really been on the scene too much, and he's definitely not I wouldn't classify him as a media person, but someone who's definitely influenced me in this political philosophical realm is Jordan Peterson, right? I'd say I've watched his videos on YouTube. He has like 2-3 hour videos. I've sat and watched those, and that kind of moves me on to just podcast, right? Because that's kind of like the new thing here. And all those people I just mentioned, they all have, well, I'm not all those person, but most of those people I just mentioned have podcast versions of their shows, right? Like Mark Levin, his stuff is in podcast version. And actually, to put this out there, back before podcasting was a thing, when I first started listening to Michael Savage and Glenn Beck, they had digital forms of their shows, and I used to pay for those. I would pay for Michael Savage. I was like on Talk Radio Network, and I would pay for Glenn Beck because I'm personally not a huge fan of the constant commercials, right, on like regular terrestrial radio. So I would pay to hear Savage, and I'd pay to hear Glenn Beck. And Mark Levin, even since back then, I think I first started listening to him in '05. He's always had a, he called it like the rewind or whatever on his website. You could always listen to his stuff on digitally. So, so now the podcast thing blowing up, I would say that the most influential podcast that's made me want to do this thing, right, is the Joe Rogan Experience, right? Like, the amount of guests and people he exposes his audience to is out there, right? He has people from all over the place, and he's kind of like, he's definitely not like a right winger or nothing like that, right? So, he's what they used to call like a Renaissance man, right? When all kinds of things about all kinds of things. He has all kinds of interest, and that's what kind of got me into like podcasts in the first place. And then from there, stemmed off to I listened to a variety of different ones from all over the political spectrum and non-political spectrum. So I'd list Radiolab, the New York Times, The Daily, but everything to The Verdict with Ted Cruz, Senator Ted Cruz. Then I'll listen to Making Sense with Sam Harris, Jocko podcast, The Art of Manliness. I'm a huge fan of Crowder, Steven Crowder, Louder Crowder. And then I dabble in a little bit of conspiracy podcasts sometimes for fun. Like I'll listen to some Alex Jones and InfoWars. And
who doesn't like a good conspiracy?
Exactly. And then this new one I'm on to right now, it's called Conspiracy Theories and Unpopular Culture with Isaac Weishaupt. And that stuff could be there's some really I've read a couple books that he's gone over. And, with all that being said, I'm not a wild conspiracy theorist at all. But I like to be aware of the different things that are floating around out there. And some things turn out to not be a conspiracy per se, right? So,
that works.
Yeah, exactly. So Blake, you want to go ahead and talk about your media influences and podcasts you listen to?
Yeah, so because of my background and stuff, I've been a blue collar worker for a number of years, so I haven't really had the time to listen to a lot of podcasts until lately. But yeah, the Joe Rogan Experience is definitely a good one. Now, because I'm working more and more again since the wonderful pandemic started, I have to listen to the guys I used to listen to on the radio, usually on podcast form. So yes, again,
exactly.
Like the great Rush Limbaugh is just. I know he's a controversial figure to some. To me, he's not a controversial figure. I think he's amazing. He inspired me to want to go into radio when I was a young kid, and that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to start doing this with you, is because it gives me that kind of outlet that I've always wanted to try out. And
yeah, for sure.
He kind of inspired me there, and sometimes he'd get calls talking about, people would ask how he got to start, and those calls are always interesting to listen to.
For sure.
And then, of course, yes, the great Mark Levin. There's nobody more well-versed in the Constitution than Mark Levin. He is one of the most knowledgeable people there is. Yes, Liberty and Tyranny was a great book, but another great one that I enjoyed listening to was, or reading, sorry, was Men in Black, which is about how the Supreme Court is really ruining
Yeah,
the
I never read that.
country.
That's on my list. It's a good
It was
read.
an interesting book, especially, I mean, that was written during the Obama years, where
Yeah,
the landscape
it's a little different.
was a little different now.
Mm,
Now, of course, the court is completely different. Uh,
absolutely.
but
We'll definitely be talking about that one of these
that's,
days. So
again, like
yeah,
a lot of the same principles in that book, like because of our political, the book talks about basically, our political systems are so divided and everything that he's saying the United States is being ruined by the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court is literally deciding everything because Congress can't get along. Nobody's acting like adults, so
yeah. Well,
it just
we'll
goes
definitely
to
talk about.
litigation.
We'll definitely get into that in one of these episodes because I definitely want to
Yeah,
talk about that because
and then
a lot of people have this complete misunderstanding of how that's supposed to work. So
well, that's
yeah,
the three branches of government and all
yeah,
that, but it's
yeah. We'll get
common
into that. We'll get
sense
into
to
that
some
later.
people.
Yeah, we'll definitely
I
dig into
do.
that.
I
Yeah,
did like Bill O'Reilly when he was on TV,
hell
Mr.
yeah.
Doing It Live. It was, especially when I was in college. It was fun when I lived in the dorms because my friends used to get mad. They'd come into my dorm room and I'd be sitting there watching Hannity and Combs, and then I'd watch O'Reilly.
Mm-hmm.
And these are people who had never watched like a political talk show before, and some people sat down to actually listen. Other people were disgusted, but
Well,
those
yeah.
shows,
So
especially
during,
like
I'm
Hannity and
sorry.
Combs was actually a pretty fun show because you got both sides of it.
Yeah, I wish they'd still do that. But that you mentioned, watching that in your dorm room. I used to watch when I was in college. I lived in a house with like four other roommates, and I would. It was like TiVo essentially, right? I would record it and watch it later or whatever. And those people would be like, "Oh, why are you watching my dad? This is what my dad watches." And I'd be like, "Well, your dad's a smart guy."
It comes down to how you're raised, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly.
Um,
So yeah, I'm sorry. Go on.
no, it's just interesting. I think it's a generation thing. Like, when I tell people my views, they like, especially women, they'll just call me, "Oh, you're just an old man. You're old fashioned." Like, no, I'm not an old man. I appreciate this country and I appreciate history. There's nothing to do with age.
Yeah.
Anybody could believe those things, but yes, I think a lot of people our age tend to think of people on the right as just old white dudes like the John McCain types. Those
Oh gosh.
that's what people, that's the stereotypical view I think that millennials and younger think of people on the right. So
I agree.
it's
I think it goes beyond that too. But
oh, it totally does, but that's
so
just
so
just
that kind of swings me into our first topic, where I know that you have a little or what's the proper word? You have you want to talk about individualism, right? Like that was like this kind of spins into that.
yeah.
So let's
It's
go ahead and dig into that.
so I mean, what is individualism? It's that's kind of a broad thing to discuss. There's so many different ways that can.
Well, let's define it when it comes to our political culture and I'm sorry, American culture in general, right?
Okay.
Because they kind of ties them together, and how that
Right.
goes against the current, currents from coming from everybody else, right? The media
So
and all that.
yeah, totally. And so if you actually look up, if you want to take it at literal value, the definition of individualism is the habit or principle of being independent and self-reliant. Now,
Yes.
how does that relate to, politics and government? It totally relates. What do you want having control over your life? Would you rather be self-reliant when it comes to things like managing your own money and property?
Hmm.
Or would you rather, just have everything be publicly owned. I mean, things like that. Those are all different factors going into individualism. Even everything's going into groups nowadays, whether it's race, gender, sexuality. But when you put people into groups like that, what you're really doing is you're doing a tremendous disservice to those individuals, because yes, they may be those things, but they're still their own person. Just because they may have, they fit into one of those groups doesn't mean that therefore they have to subscribe to everything that those groups believe. Every individual is different. I think that we like to call it groupthink, and
Yeah, groupthink.
there's a lot of different factors behind it, but really, unfortunately, that's what's rapid in our culture now, is this whole notion that you have to belong to a certain tribe. You hear the term tribalism,
Yeah.
and it's really more about encouraging people to be themselves, whether they agree with you or not. You need to, I think, well, I'm not speaking at you, but we all need to learn to be better and appreciate people for who they are. Just
So,
because
I'm sorry.
they're in a group, like white, black, gay, straight, whatever, you can't expect somebody to think or vote or do anything a certain way. You just shouldn't expect that.
So I think it comes down to, like, I agree with what you're saying, but I think it also comes down to, right? I think the reason why some people are against this whole notion of individualism is because they find comfort in groups of with people that agree with them. You know what I mean? Like, they find comfort in numbers. They might, certain people in certain areas or communities might feel alienated for whatever reasons, and then they find others that are along, have the same type of differences,
Oh
whether it
well,
be
yeah.
external or internal. But I think
Uh,
at the end of the day, though, I think it's it's free thought, right? Like those free thoughts to think differently or have a different opinion, right, than the
right.
culturally accepted, popular viewpoint of the mainstream. And so the reason I believe and promote individualism is that it's okay to have a different viewpoint than the rest of other people that may look like you or not look like you, right? And one thing that kind of strikes me as, and this goes back to, I'll take it back to 2012, right? So we have the Obama administration, and we have Romney, who I am not a fan of, but at the time he was, if you were someone that saw Obama as the ultimate status, someone who believed in, government activism, 'cause that's what he
I
was,
could
right?
do we could do a whole three
Yeah,
hours
we
on
could do a whole three
on that
hours on it, right?
stuff.
Absolutely. But, like, at the end of the day, when it comes to him, when it comes to define him in my eyes, is he was just a government. He believed in government activism, and that's opposed to me. You're taking a huge, large bureaucratic centralization of power versus the individual, right? So, to me, when Romney lost that election, there's all kinds of reasons we could debate for hours on that alone too. But what I'm getting at is the feeling I had that next morning was, I don't understand how these guiding principles that I believe in, right? Liberty, freedom of the individual, right? We're talking about individualism. Like those basic principles, right? Like, why does that have to be a white dude thing? You know what I mean?
No,
Like, why does it
it's
have to be a white dude thing? Like, to
right.
me, why does it matter the color of your skin or your gender or sexuality when it
It's for
comes to
everybody.
it's for everybody. It's a universal,
I mean,
merit
right.
based
So,
thing. Like, it's not about what you look like. It's not about where you came from or how you were raised or what class you belong to at the moment or have been. It's about freedom and liberty of the individual, right?
well,
Kind of what I got onto earlier. Like, we should have the right to, live your life any way you want, as long as you don't impede on the liberty and the rights of someone else. And I don't understand why that has. I don't understand how, these these different quote unquote groups, like they don't believe, like, why do these sectors of the population, based off these identity politics is what that is, why do they not embrace that? Like, what's so bad
They
about?
haven't been taught any other way. It's an education issue. But to go
You're right.
back to what you were saying about, it, why does it seem to be only a white person thing? And the funny thing about that is, it's not, right. Every single American lives under the Constitution. I
Exactly.
believe in the Constitution. We do have the Bill of Rights, and we are guaranteed the pursuit of happiness. The pursuit, that means we're free to do as we please. We're not guaranteed to succeed,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not guaranteed to fail. But if we do fail, we don't have that protection. You kind of have to be willing to put yourself out there to succeed. And I think, going back to what you were saying about, people just want to be in their little groups, and I think it's because I really believe this. I think a lot of people are afraid to fail. They're afraid to put themselves out there, and
Very true.
they prefer to have
Comfort.
that babysitter. I'd say, if you want to use the analogy of the government being a babysitter, or whoever, your boss, anybody, your parents, somebody taking care of, having that comfort blanket.
You're right about that.
And there are a lot of people that don't have that comfort blanket, that, they go through the stuff, they struggle. Some people make it, some people don't. Unfortunately, it's a fact of life. Doesn't make that person any better than anyone else. That's the way the system works. We're all free to make our own choices, and unfortunately, with choices come rewards and consequences, and that differs from person to person.
So I'm right there with you. Right, we are on the exact same page. But I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment, just because I've had these discussions with, with different people, and what they will claim, right? And I'm not even say they're wrong. I disagree with them, but they'll argue that there's a system in place that does not. It does not.
Go ahead.
There's a system in place that does not grant them those same rights, essentially, right? They're essentially saying there's a system in place holding them back. You could call it, white supremacy. You could call it the patriarchy. You could call it white privilege. You could call it systemic racism, right? And they'll say that in this day and age, that those systems are holding people back. Now, I will disagree, but see, I had a conversation with someone recently, and so full disclosure, I'm I'm half Caucasian, I guess, if you want to call it that, and half Filipino, and you're full-blooded Caucasian, as far as I know, right?
I am an evil white man.
So all I'm saying, because I don't see color personally, but I'm just stating it for the sake of this point in my conversation. And I was talking to someone who was a person of color, right? And they came at me with, well, you don't understand what it's like because you're not a person of color. And I was like, hey, well, technically I am. I don't flaunt that, because to me that's not a thing. Like I'm colorblind, right? I know you are too, right? So
yeah. One of my best friends growing up, I met him in second grade.
Yeah.
We met on the school bus, sat right next to him when we hit it off. The last thing either of us thought about was race. It was making a friend, and going to school with somebody, having a friend at school. That was all it was about.
Exactly.
And I was lucky, just, again, it could come down to parenting too, because my parents never taught me to think about race or things like that. It was always ingrained in me that if I ever wanted to be anything, that I have to do it myself. Nobody else was going to help me with it.
Yeah, I agree. But going back to what I was saying, though, is that when I was speaking to this person, you know, they kind of threw it against me, like, you know,
Oh,
well, you
yeah.
don't know what it's like, right?
No,
But
and to
see,
some extent,
but
to some extent, we don't. You're right.
yeah, to
They're
extent
right
we
in
don't.
that. We're not.
You
We're
know,
not in their position.
I'm not an African American male walking around, right?
Right. Yeah.
But here's the thing though, and this is something I learned from this conversation I had with this guy is, uh, there is a difference in legal, right, legality and laws, right, in our institutions. There's a difference between that holding back people versus racist views. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, there's a difference between prejudice, and there's a difference between that and legal things holding people back. Because the argument I had with him came down to, you know, like, is there a system literally in place keeping people back, like a legal system? And I argue that there is not in today's America, right?
Sounds like one of those conspiracy theories.
But I mean, I'll agree that there was that before. That's what Jim Crow was.
Well, yeah.
That's what slavery was, right?
And that's
But I'm saying
what they always
in this country in 2020, right? In this country in 2020, I just don't see that being a thing. You know, that's not to say that there aren't people with racist views out there. That's not to say that people that hold prejudices towards certain groups of people, because I don't think you can fight that. You can try. You can try to fight that in the court of public ideas or whatever. You know, you can fight that. But you know, you could take a moral crusade, I guess, on a personal kind of thing. You know. And I honestly, I think by talking to each other and reaching out, that's probably the best way to do that. But what I'm saying is there's a difference between that and laws. Because he was like, yeah, you know, no matter what laws you pass, you know, there's still racist people out there. And I was like, I agree. But
you can't stop individuals from acting
you know,
stupid.
And he gave me plenty of examples, right, of him being discriminated against. And I feel bad for him. And I've experienced some of that in my life too. You know, it's heartbreaking, right? It sucks, but there's a difference between feeling, you know, getting your feelings hurt, and having to go through a crap experience like that, right? There's a difference between being discriminated against. It's extremely disrespectful. It's belittling. You know, it's heartbreaking. It's terrible for people to have to go through that. It really sucks, but I'm saying that there's a difference between that and a legal system that holds people back. You know what I'm saying? Like, just because you're a person of color, I honestly do not believe that stat alone is going to hold you back from making it in this country, or at least having that opportunity to pursue your happiness, right? To have that individualism, right? To have those rights and to pursue the American dream. I don't think that just because you're a person of color, like, you might have it a little harder, right? You may have that, and honestly, I think that comes from more of a economic perspective rather than a race perspective. But you know, it's not gonna. People aren't gonna hold you. Like, the system isn't gonna hold you back because you're a person of color. People certain individuals might treat you bad, right? Because they're ignorant, but I don't think that you're not gonna make it just because of that. Does that make sense?
Oh, I mean, makes sense to me. Preaching to the choir, really. But
what I'm saying is, you understand what I'm saying, that these people, like, you know, I'm all about understanding.
Well, there's no
yeah.
law. You know, there's
yeah,
no system. There's no, you know, law on the book anymore.
But what I'm arguing is that these people that believe this, they don't know how to differentiate between the law and a legal system versus the way people feel. You know what I'm saying? Like, they argue from that corner as if, they argue from that corner as if it's one and the same.
It's not, though. That's the problem.
It's not.
You can't control. Again, going back to individual people, you know, you can't stop somebody from being a jerk to someone. It's
You can't.
I mean, you can't.
As much as we all want
like,
to.
if I go to the grocery store and some woman cuts in front of me in line and says, you know, F you, blah, 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 and I say, hey, stop. What what am I going to do? Am I going to call the cops and say, "Hey, this person was mean to me"? I mean,
Yeah.
that's a sophomoric example.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
not as serious as the charges of racism and things like that.
Yeah.
Racism, sexism, do they exist? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But you can't, I mean, you really can't stop it. You can't really argue that there's a system in
Exactly.
place because it comes down to an individual person acting that way. And you
Absolutely.
have to ask yourself, why do they think that way? Why are they acting that way? And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, that's the way they were raised, pure and
Absolutely.
simple.
And
Has
that's what I'm
nothing to do
saying.
with the system. Sometimes it has to do with,
Honest.
geographic location.
Yeah.
Sometimes it has to do with their own circumstances or experience with somebody of a different color or whatever. There's all sorts of different factors, but there's no mass, government system anymore
And honestly,
persecuting people.
there's no mass government program that's going to change
No,
that. Right? It's
not
just not going to
really.
happen. The government can't pass any more laws or set up any more programs that is going to change that. Like the only way to change that, in my view, is for people to reach out and talk to each other, and to that way they, the more dialogue between different people and different communities, I think is the solution to a lot
And
of these
you're
issues.
100% correct. But
Yeah,
again, going back to what we were saying,
group think and all
earlier
that.
about social media and the internet, unfortunately, they've been used as a tool to divide people.
Absolutely.
And I think if people really did just turn off the TV, turn off the internet, don't do that until you're done listening to this show, by the way. But turn off the internet and go out and go outside, talk to your neighbor, maybe talk to somebody that you think has a different point of view. And I would guarantee you that about 90% of those people you would find something in common with, because at the end of the day,
We're
we're
all
all just out
humans.
here trying to make it, man. Some
Yeah.
people have families, some people have kids to take care of. We all just want to take care of our families and do the best we can, and that's all we can ever do is the best we can.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to end that topic. So let's move on to one thing I want to discuss is today is, I forgot to mention, today is November 1st, 2020. So we have 2 days until the, some people say there's this election going on, right?
Oh, there
So,
is? I didn't know. Oh,
so I
wow.
kind of want to discuss
I better
that.
get out of my basement.
So I kind of want to discuss that, as we enter the last 48 hours before what could be the biggest election of our lives. I mean, who knows?
Isn't
But
it always?
yeah. So so I guess I'll ask you directly. What's your opinion on? Well, who do you think is going to win?
Well, I mean, I do have a favorite. I
Who do you want to
I would
win?
love for Trump to win. I think a lot of things are going his way. Unfortunately, because of, again, media, social media, things like that, we don't know what's necessarily true. Again, in 2016, remember, Trump stood no chance. He was down. He was down, so far in the polls. Everybody was laughing that he was even the candidate. And then what happened? But this time, at the same time, I think the mistake people are making is that, Trump is having these huge rallies and they are impressive,
They
but
are.
rallies and crowd sizes don't really matter, because if you're looking at the age we're living in, coronavirus, I think a lot of people that may be voting for Biden, they're more cautious about
Going out in the public.
going out into public and going around people. And so just because Biden doesn't have huge crowds doesn't mean that, people aren't voting for him. I definitely think the voters are there for him, but you don't see it on TV. But on this, it's just really hard because
Trust the
you
polls.
can't really trust anything. You can't
Yeah.
trust the polls. You can't trust the media. You can't trust anything. All you
Yeah.
can do as an individual is go out and vote. I mean, you hear it all the time: go vote, go vote. But it really is true. That's the only really option you can do. I think Trump's going to win, and I think he's going to surprise a lot of people. I think the fact that Biden had to come in the final days of the campaign to Minnesota, which, I mean, this is about as blue as it
Stronghold.
gets. And the fact that Biden had to come here to hold a rally and to try to get voters, I think that should have the Democrats very
Scared.
worried about what's going on in Minnesota and other places in the country. Again, we don't know. There's been a lot of people that have voted early already. Um, it really depends. I mean, it could come down to how many younger people are voting. It really comes down to, different groups. Like, it's one of the major reasons I think Trump could win is made basically because he's set to have the highest turnout for African Americans ever by a Republican president, as well as
Hispanics. Yeah.
Latino voters. And that's huge. If he can take just a chunk of that, uh, that's a huge advantage to him. And I think the reason he's people on the left don't understand why Trump is popular, and he's popular, and he reaches out to appeals to so many people because he stands for what the Democrat Party used to stand for, which was the worker, hard work, taking care of worker, the blue collar worker,
Yeah.
making sure there was jobs. That used to be the Democrat platform. And I think that's why he's gained so many people over to his side, because he really has helped people in this country regain jobs and have having the dignity of going to work. So yeah, it's to wrap up. I mean, it really could go any way. I think Trump will win, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised to see it go the other way as well. We just don't know.
Well, I agree with you there. Couple things though I'll note. One, uh, we do talk about crowd size and stuff like that. And one thing I'll say, I mean, we mentioned, coronavirus, and a lot of Biden supporters are, they're terrified of coronavirus. They're not going to come out in the public. But another thing to add on to that I want to mention is, and no one ever mentions this, is, Hillary, when she ran in 2016, she never grew any big crowds either, right?
That's true.
But one thing to remember is she did still win the popular vote. So it's not like nobody voted for her.
Yep.
You know
No,
what I
you're
mean?
right.
So that's
That's a
just
good
what,
point.
yeah, it's just the point I wanted to make.
And it
And
could very well go that way again. Trump
yeah,
may not win the popular vote, and
yeah,
then we'll have that whole argument again.
exactly.
But that's the whole, well, that's the whole
But
point of the Electoral
yeah,
College, but
well,
that's a
another
whole
another
other.
thing I want to get into is the based off what we are just talking about is the well, I'll just say this. I mean, in my opinion, right? I think that Trump's going to win in a landslide, but I also
Why is
believe.
that?
So I think he's a lead. Or well, hold on. Let me finish. So I think he's going to win a landslide, but I also think it's possible that he could lose. So I
Yeah,
understand that's like
that it
very
could
two.
even, it
I
could
understand it's
really,
two extremes, but I mean, what I'm
really
saying
could
is he
go
either
either
win in a
way.
landslide or he'll barely
Yeah,
lose. You know what I
yeah.
mean? But I think he'd win in a landslide because I think he has momentum going towards him in the most recent times. But the real reason I think he'll win in a landslide is because what has happened in the last year, right? When you look at the lockdowns, right? So I know the criticism towards him in terms of coronavirus, like the 200,000 deaths are under his, his responsibility. I think that's complete hogwash, right?
Oh, yeah.
Um, and that's just no, like
People need to be looking at their governors. Like
exactly. See, the problem is
it's
so
states' rights.
the yeah,
The president can't go tell Gavin Newsom to shut down his state. That's
Yeah.
That's the genius of our system. It's states' rights.
So here's a few things. So number one, most people in this country, it seems like, and maybe I'm not being fair, but a large proportion of this country, and I feel like a lot of them's on the left, but they're probably on the right too, is they don't understand basic elements of how our country works, right? They don't understand how the government works. Like we were just saying, right? The governors, they don't understand federalism at all, right? They blame Trump for local things that happen in their cities and states that Trump doesn't have the jurisdiction to even deal with. So that's one thing. The second thing is he did shut down travel between China and Europe pretty early on. And at the exact same time that he was doing that, the Democrats, like Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi, were calling him racist and xenophobic and hey, come party in Chinatown. There's early March, right? Like he shut down travel from China on my birthday, which was 31 in January, right? And in early March, here's Nancy Pelosi saying, hey, come down to Chinatown for Chinese New Year. And if we're actually going to do a real investigation, I bet you'd find that the virus spread a lot during the Chinese New Year. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you see that. You see Biden literally, and he lied about it in the debates, but he literally called him xenophobic for doing that, right? And then, so that's two. And then three, the same people that say that Trump is a fascist, an authoritarian, a tyrant, a dictator, the same people that say that are the same people that say he should have done a complete lockdown in the beginning and had a mask mandate like immediately, and he didn't do these things soon enough and long enough. So, which is it? Is he a fascist dictator? Or do you need him to do things that a fascist dictator would do?
Yeah, well,
you know what I'm saying?
It's because he's done such a good job, and one of the best things about Trump and the reason TDS is a thing is because he really has just beaten them at their own game, and to the point where they're just like the pigeon.
Oh, I agree.
Crapping on the chessboard.
I agree. He knows how to troll him. He knows how to troll him. He knows how to
He's in their head 24/7.
24/7. So just for people, so let me just say, just for people who don't know, I mentioned TDS earlier. Now you've mentioned TDS. Just for any audience members that don't know what we're talking about, that's Trump derangement syndrome. And the odds are, if you pay attention to politics at all, you've probably known someone who may even been like a Republican before, right? But they're so unhinged these days, or maybe they're a libertarian, but now they're so unhinged that you could see the mental breakdown in their anti-Trumpness. You know what I mean? Like they are literally like going crazy about it, and maybe even going into depression about it. Right.
And I think there's the reason for that. Well, it depends on the person, but I think when you see it, like, you have the Republican people, the never Trumpers and people like that, it's because Trump really has come in and changed the game again. Like I said, he is for the average American. He is for the worker. He's not there to play games about who gets this bill and who gets to go to this foreign country for this amount of money. That's not what he's there for.
I agree. So, but
and they don't like that.
They don't like it at all. So
he's ruining the game.
I want to expand on that in a little bit, but I also want to finish my point, because that was actually my first point was the lockdown. All right. My point of why so I'm going to tell you why I think he will win, and then why I want him to win. Right. And you're kind of talking about why I want him to win, but why I think he will win is, so you have the lockdown issue and the coronavirus issue, and then issue number 2 is where I think the left completely overplayed their hand, was the riots, right?
Oh, absolutely. I can tell you that.
It was a riot. So the fact that, all these people went out to, protest and stuff over the George Floyd thing. And even though, I'm about to say something a little controversial. One, I'll say that I did watch the video the day it hit, right? And it did genuinely make me angry. Right, like I watched it and I was like, "Hey, get your knee off that dude!" Right, like it generally made me feel bad and angry. So I can understand why people would want to protest, and why you want to protest police brutality, right, or maybe excessive force. Like there are certain things, I'm very pro law enforcement, but there are certain things I could get on board in terms of things that I'd be against, right? Of course, I'm going to be against any form of police brutality or excessive force. And of course, if there are actual reforms that would actually make things change without hurting the police, like defunding them, of course I wouldn't be for that. I'd be okay for certain things if people were to explain them to me, things that may or may not work or whatever. I'm open to that discussion at least, right? But what happened was these people went out. Well, the controversial thing I'm about to say is, if you go back and look at the report, it looks like he died of a drug overdose and not the knee on the neck. But we'll move. We'll leave that for
That's not
another.
really controversial,
Yeah.
Scott, but anyway, I could tell you it's a fact. Can I just jump in?
Well, hold on. I'm still in the middle of my point. So
Okay.
but my point is, so the peaceful quote unquote protest happened, and there was a lot of people on the left did say that the police did respond too strong at first, and I don't know if I agree with that. There was videos here and there of people getting shot with rubber bullets or beaten or whatever. There was that stuff at first, but I think the response to that, where the left overplayed and they might even had the ball in their court at that exact pinpoint in time, where the police were responding a little strong at first, but when you had the base of the protests escalate nightly into violent riots and looting of businesses, a lot of them locally owned black businesses getting looted and burned down, and several cities across I would say at one point almost every major city had these things going on, and it was even going on into smaller suburban communities. You know what I'm saying? Like it happened here in San Diego, right, where they burned down the whole strip mall. But what I'm saying is, with the riots going on, and then these cities and governors not taking the actions needed, and these are blue cities and blue states where they weren't allowing their police and National Guard to stop it, right, and allowing these businesses to be destroyed, right, and a lot of these protests would result out of struggle sessions. If we'll go back and look up Maoism, right, and what happened in China, where people would surround people just eating dinner and force them to confess to certain things as they humiliate them, and the forced kneeling, put your hand in, all that stuff was going on with BLM and Antifa, right, in all these cities, and then the Democrats not speaking out against it, or if they did, it was not really strong at all. Like Biden didn't say anything until super late in the game, right? And I think they totally overplayed their hand, and I think they handed this election to Trump. They gave the silent majority something to be scared of, right?
No, they totally did. I could tell you straight from living in Minnesota. Again, going back to my point earlier of Biden has to come back to Minnesota to defend Minnesota. Why do you think that is? Where did George Floyd take place? Where did all that stuff take place?
Good point.
People in this state, I can tell you for a fact, are fed up not only with BLM and Antifa, but also with our governor. Our governor, he's going to have a tough road ahead, I think, ever getting reelected in this state. But again, going off your point, it is a good point that a lot of these typically blue cities saw what the radical left is capable of.
Yeah.
And Minneapolis was certainly ground zero for that. I know for a fact that even they're already planning, the people down in Minneapolis, if Trump were to win Minnesota, they're already talking about doing it all again down in Minneapolis. I mean, is this what people want? Is this what people want to vote for? Is this, even Biden, I believe in the debate said we're going to have a dark winter. Is that what he meant? Are we going to, is it just going to be, shutdowns and violence? Is that what the American people want? So yes, I totally believe your point is very valid there. I think a lot of people, the silent majority, even some Democrats, I would argue, that have been lifelong Democrats, just think this is nuts. We've had enough.
Now, I will play devil's advocate for a moment, right? So I do think that, and like you mentioned, Trump will probably have the highest amount of voters from, Black and Latinos that a Republican president has ever had, right? But I do think it's possible that he may lose like elderly white votes, right? Maybe even suburban women, because
Yeah, probably
you've
suburban
seen
women.
you've
I
seen a
don't know
lot of
about
suburban
older
women in the
people.
protest. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot,
No,
and I
it's funny
think
when
I
you
think
look at
they say
you look at
BLM and they're
Black
all white
Lives.
women, right?
Yeah, you look at Black Lives Matter. It's like, where are the black people? It's
but
all Karens.
they're all Karens, exactly. But what I foresee as a possibility, or at least the argument that Biden is making, or people that want to vote for him, is that the fact that, like, kind of like what you just said, it goes both ways, is what I'm saying. You said, like, hey, these people in Minneapolis are preparing to riot, essentially, right, if Trump wins, and that's why we need to vote for Trump to stop that kind of thing. But so someone could also make the argument that those things are happening because Trump is winning. Now, to me, that's almost an intimidation thing. You know what I mean?
That is.
But what I'm saying is their argument though is, hey, vote for Biden, and all these protests and all these riots will stop. All right. Now, I don't cash in on that, because I think that they'll continue, as in the case if you look at Portland and Chaz, remember Chaz or Chop, whatever you call it. Those are liberal
Yeah,
places in the
Chuck.
first. Those are places run by Democrats. They're blue cities and blue
Premium,
states. So why
premium
would it
vacation
change?
destination.
But what I'm saying is, why would that change if you have a Democrat president, right? Like, they
So,
riot and loot under Democrat leadership locally. Are they going to suddenly stop rioting when they have a Democrat president? No, they're not. In fact,
mm,
he'll probably placate to them in certain areas. You know what I'm saying? So that's what my devil's advocate argument is, that they say voting for Biden will, because people are not going to react negatively like that in the streets, that stuff won't happen. And maybe they're right at first. Like, maybe if Biden were to win, there would not be this huge backlash of protests and riots in the street, but eventually it would be. And my proof is point up Portland, where they had 100 plus days of protests. I think it's still going on. And look at Seattle, and look at all these other places that are run by Democrats, and they still riot and loot. Right. So even if it didn't happen, if Biden won immediately, it still would happen, and it'll probably be worse. Because
I
my belief is that if Trump does win and it does happen and it's prolonged, that I hope that he does something like the Insurrection Act and just overrides these Democrat governors and mayors and just puts an end to all the violence.
I understand your devil's advocate, and it's valid. But again, for me, when it comes to BLM and Antifa, um, just follow the money. Who controls these groups? It's all political.
Absolutely.
It's there to cause chaos for Trump. It's all for this election season. Whether that was the strategy that they thought would be best for them, I don't know. But if you follow the money, a lot of these groups, they're getting supplied by somebody. Yeah, I don't know how
Absolutely.
many people are familiar with George Soros, but he definitely pays these groups a lot of different money.
Absolutely.
BLM, Black Lives Matter, has made over $1 billion, $1 billion, and
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen them uh, use any of that money to rebuild a neighborhood that's been burned down or destroyed, or to build a black
Nope.
school, or to help black Americans in any capacity. None of it has been used for what they claim to use it for. It's all being raised for politics. So there is a part of me that, if you follow the money and look at who's running these things, I think it is purely political. And a part of me sees where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of me thinks that I don't think these people would want to give Biden a hard time. They want to. I think the goal after the election, if he were to win, are you familiar with the term gaslighting?
Yeah.
There's
Well, go ahead and define that.
so gaslighting, roughly. I don't have it in front of me. I can look it up for you here
But just
real
go over what
quick.
you. Yeah.
But basically, it's like somebody treats you like crap, for a long
Yeah.
time. Like, say, like an abusive. Okay, so I found the definition. The definition is to manipulate someone by psychological means into questioning their own sanity. So what I'm getting at is, they've been rioting, burning down cities and all this stuff and acting crazy. And I think, if Biden were to win, I think it would be a gaslighting session where all of a sudden, the left is going to come out. Biden's going to come out and be like, this is all sunshine and rainbows. We all love each other. It's you people. Why are you people on the right so negative? Why are you acting this way? And it's going to be like a gaslighting situation where they're going to
Make
try
us
to
sound
imply
crazy.
that we're the crazy ones. Like we don't remember what happened all through 2020. They're going to be like, that we all want to get along, but you people on the right, you guys don't know, you guys are crazy. I don't know, we don't know what you're talking about. And I think, to me, that's more. I think what's going to happen is
So,
that.
so if I may, I think you're right about it. I think that would happen. I think that would happen. But what I disagree with you with is that it's kind of like there's like the Democrat politicians and certain individuals in the government. They're puppeteers, right? Like they're using these groups. They're using each other, right? They're using these. That's like their foot soldiers or these Antifa and BLM. It's like their foot soldiers, right? And they're
Oh yeah.
using them. They're using them to gain power, right? And there's this concept. It's conspiratorial, but it's called out of order chaos, right? That you create a situation of chaos, and some people even claim that Trump somehow has done this one way or another. But you create a chaotic situation, and then out of
Right.
that you bring order,
Well,
right?
Obama was the master of that.
Yeah,
That was his
exactly.
whole thing.
Yeah,
I
so
think that was the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. He said, "Yeah, out of order comes chaos."
yeah, like it's like it's a thing, right? And but what, I guess so. My point is, yes, I believe if Biden were to win, God forbid, I think that's exactly what would happen. He would gaslight the right? But I don't think he has complete control of the puppets. You know what I'm saying? Because some of these puppets truly are Marxist and
No, they are.
anarchist.
Yeah,
And
you're right.
and just because you're like, hey, Trump won, or I mean, excuse me, hey, Biden won, you guys are good now. I don't think they're gonna stop. These people truly hate some our basic fundamentals and want to destroy everything.
Oh, they
That's
do.
their
Same.
philosophies, and they're not gonna take orders from Biden or the establishment left. If they're like, hey, you need to stand down now because we won, we're good. They don't care. You know what
No,
I'm saying?
but again, like I was saying, like for example, Minneapolis. I mean, they were finding pallets with supplies like bricks and stuff to
Yeah, and
to
so
destroy
in
buildings.
my
Like,
opinion, I
where's
think
that
there's
coming from? That's
so
organized.
I,
That's
bel- I agree with you, but the problem is that people on the left argue that we're doing that. They say the right's putting those on there
of
so that
course.
these people will do that and we could blame them for it. I mean, so that goes both ways. I agree with you. I think it's some dark forces of the left, or at least of the political establishment, that's doing that. But they just point the finger too, right? They try to claim that some of the most violent things that have happened in these riots are provoked by militia type right wingers out there, which I highly doubt that's the case, but it so yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I see your point
yeah,
because, to go to one other extreme, like, again, this is kind of a drastic example, but one of the reasons the Nazis rose to power in the 30s was because they had a group of the Hitler Youth. They called them the Browncoats, and what they would do is basically almost the same kind of thing.
yeah, they'd
Antifa
rabble
does. They
rouse,
go
yeah,
and they rabble rouse, they harass people,
burn
they
down
they burn
places.
down places of businesses, homes. Oh, you're not voting, or you don't support Adolf Hitler. Well, you can kiss your house goodbye. And so
Yeah.
yeah, in that certain circumstance, yeah, there is a possibility that could very well happen. Again, it depends on how much power Joe Biden actually has in his administration, but that's a whole other debate. Again,
But the thing is, he wouldn't have that much power, right? It would be. I'm not even saying it would be Kamala. There's a political elite that's that Biden is a puppet to, and Kamala Harris.
No,
They're
it's
just
the
puppets.
globalists. Yeah, follow the money.
The globalist political elite.
Follow the
And
money.
and the thing is, so I talked about how why I think Trump will win, but here's why I think Trump will win, but here's why I think, or this is why I want him to win. Right, the reason I want him to win is because all the things that you mentioned, like all the good stuff he has done, he's made a bunch of accomplishments and results, more than most presidents have in the modern age in his first term, right? With like real results, right? Results driven. But the main reason why, because I don't think he's a perfect person, right? I assume you agree with me. Yeah, nobody is.
Nobody's
right?
a perfect person.
Nobody's a perfect person, but he's not a perfect.
He's not.
And look, there's
nervous of anybody who claimed they were perfect.
Yeah, and I also believe there's also TDS on the right, meaning there's Trump. What's the D? I'm trying to remember now. Basically it's God, I can't remember the acronym now, but there's another acronym where it's TDS, but it's in the opposite. It's where no matter, like, Trump is basically God, right? Like people
Trump delusion system.
Yeah, that's it. Trump. That's what it is. It's Trump delusional syndrome. So there's Trump derangement syndrome and there's Trump delusionment syndrome, and there's people that he can do no wrong. Yeah. I do not believe that. I do not believe that at all.
He's true believers of any kind.
Yeah, there are a lot of people that are on that side, right? Like, I know a lot of them personally, but at the end of the day, the reason why I do want him to win is because, at least right now, he's the only one in the government with the power he has that is standing against the onslaught and the tidal wave of that collectivism that I was talking about earlier, right? Like, he is, and the reason I say that is because it's not so much that he's like standing against these invisible forces like that. He's standing against the global, establishment, political elite in our own government that wants those things to happen. He's at least, at the minimum, he's slowing it down. You know what I mean? If he's not putting it down, let's stop. Like, let's not do that. You know what I mean? Like, he gives people someone to believe in who will stop this, like, tidal wave coming at you of this, hardcore collectivism. You know what I mean? Like, it's that power elite. And, like you said, he's an outsider. He's not a politician. He doesn't make certain deals and stuff and talks like a politician. He's that one active force we have right now that's at least the minimum slowing it down. You know what I mean? Like, you had Obama, and he was all about pushing that stuff forward strongly, right? Like fast forwarding it. And then you get Trump, and he's like, stop. And he's reversing it where he can.
Again,
and maybe he's even doing it unwillingly, because I don't believe that, Trump is no doctrinaire conservative. He's more pragmatic, but in his pragmatism, he is stopping these forces from moving forward, and that's why I want him to win, because I would like this slowing down of the state to happen in the next 4 years.
And that needs to happen, but that's again. That's 4 years, and unfortunately, as we know, the left never stops. They'll continue to be back, and then after Trump's gone, we've got to find somebody to take up that mantle.
Well, that needs to start right now.
You said.
Yeah,
but again, like what you said, we've got to have at least 4 more years. I think the major thing that needs to happen to permanently at least slow down or create barriers is we need to continue to add more people in the courts, conservatives, people on the right to the courts, because that's
and he's been doing that. He's definitely been doing that. He
has been, but we need to do more, because the left is not going to stop, and he's got to do something. Yes, we need him for 4 more years, but we've got to put a plan in place to where we can check these people well after Trump's gone, because they're not going to stop. And a lot of them, a lot of these people, the AOC types, they're young. They're not going anywhere. They're going to be around for a long time.
And so one thing I want to mention is I said it, the left, you said the left. I just want people to understand. When I'm saying the left, I don't. If you're someone who holds views of the left, I'm not necessarily talking about you, right? I'm talking about the radical elements that are pushing towards collectivism. Like you just mentioned, AOC, like those types that they stand for everything that is not, in the Constitution.
Right, but
You know what I
at the
mean?
same time, like that's why I believe. I mean, I'm not trying to trash good Democrats, but
Yeah.
I'm just pointing
Because
out the reality that that's the way their political party has gone.
yeah, I
You
agree, but
like it or
it's a
not,
radical left. You know what I mean?
it is, but
But
it's taken over that whole party,
yeah, they run it for sure.
unfortunately.
For sure. Because I would be okay with a center left, liberal democratic way. I'd have my differences. I'd fight against those as I could,
Well,
but it wouldn't be the
yeah,
end of the world. You know what I mean? Like
it used to be that
it
way.
used to
It
be that
used to be,
way.
the Republicans and Democrats. The whole argument was, okay, we've got families, there's kids, there's jobs. There are a lot of the issues, overlapped for both parties.
Yeah,
And then the fight would be like how best to solve those problems.
yeah,
Is to now we don't even have those overlaps anymore. It's completely gone to two extremes of either loving America or completely changing it into something else.
and I
It's like you
will.
don't have that overlap anymore.
Yeah, you're right in the parties. But I do think when it comes to people, that
Oh
the
yeah,
that the overlaps are there, right? Like if we go out and we reach out to people, now I'm not saying every single person. I mean, those radical elements are alive because there are people with those radical views. You know what I'm saying? But also think there's also a huge portion, even larger portion of people that aren't on those extremes. You know what I mean?
of
So
course not. But I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, it should always be people over politics. But unfortunately, the political parties are the ones, if people aren't paying attention, those are the people that are going to make the decisions. So I would call for a left of center Democrats, moderate Democrats, rational Democrats. You've got a fight on your hand. You need to fight to take your party back and have a more rational platform.
and
Or
I
we're going
honestly
to say
believe
goodbye to the
if
Democrat Party as we know it.
if Biden wins, I think that fight will still happen. I think
You think so?
I think so. I
Mm.
think the radicals will win, but I think that fight will happen.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I
Now,
mean, they're organized. They're organized and they're motivated. Again, to
yeah,
what you said.
mm,
One more point. Sorry,
yeah,
that kind of sparked the idea of when about why you think Trump will win and everything. And one
yeah.
of the things that just sparked in my mind is in 2016, everybody thought Trump was a joke, so nobody really took him seriously. The left definitely didn't take him seriously. So I don't think
Well, I was just gonna say
a lot of
I disagree
folks
with you there.
voted.
I don't think everybody took him for a joke.
No, but
I think the
they
left and
didn't
the
think
mainstream, the
there's
left and the mainstream took
majority
him
of
for a joke.
majority of this country didn't think he was going to win. I mean, come on. But my
I
point
thought he did.
is,
I thought he would.
I think this time in for to make the case for Biden winning, I think the left is going to be highly motivated this time around compared to last time.
Yeah, I agree with that. They will be. They will be.
They're not. It's
Taking the
no longer, oh
chance.
yeah, oh
Yeah.
yeah, Hillary's got this, whatever.
Yeah,
It's
I
not
agree with you
that
there.
anymore. It's
I
like,
agree
you
with you.
have to get rid of this guy.
So one last thing, one last topic I want to move on to is you mentioned to me before the show you wanted to discuss Fauci, the
Yeah.
Fauci.
Well,
So I'll let you
the
lead this.
Fauci. I don't know the man
What's
personally. Obviously, I never will, but who the hell gave this guy so much power? Who gave this guy a platform? Because at the beginning of the pandemic, when we shut down the country, you know, um, he was all about, oh, the Trump administration is doing great. Everything is going wonderful. And then, of course, even up to a few weeks ago, he said he believes that the Trump administration did everything right.
Mm-hmm.
So then, all of a sudden Trump says something about, just, he said, I believe, Tony's a good man, but I think he's all over the place. So now all of a sudden it's political to where now Fauci is going out and just, he's all over the place. On one hand, he has to defend himself because he was part of those decisions, but now he's saying, magically that the Trump response was a disaster and that Trump winning would continue that disaster. I mean, this man has absolutely no credibility. He's a long-term bureaucrat, and he's doing. I mean, there was a point there where I think he was getting, an interview a day from every single platform or news station in this
Huge
country.
network, yeah.
And it's just like, I think this is what it is for him. It's not even about uh, it's not even about coronavirus or the response anymore. I think this guy's in it for himself. He's trying to build a platform and popularity for himself, and it's really, to me, it's really disgraceful. I don't think this man has any clue what he's doing anymore. I mean, he was in on the response for the swine flu, by the way, with the Obama administration, and that was a disaster.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he can point the fingers at Trump all he wants, but I mean, when it comes to infectious diseases and all these things, he's the one that's the supposed expert, and he's the one who has made it a political thing. And I think it's for his own personal gain. And quite frankly, I think it's disgusting, and I think that if he had any dignity, he would retire and go away.
All right. So, I think the reason why he's he is what he is because most people that, well, at the beginning of the pandemic, for a lot of people, especially people who aren't political and tuned in or informed, like you and me, right? A lot of people are just, they go on day to day. They don't tune in too much into politics, or they barely even follow current events. They just kind of watch the local news and stuff like that. When the pandemic went off, a lot of these people freaked out. I mean, even me, for a slight moment, I got a little nervous at the very beginning of it, And I think seeing that, task force, and you saw Dr. Fauci up there, and he seemed like a reasonable, no BS type person, right? That people are looking to. They were looking for like a strong, like the same, like I mentioned earlier, the same people that, Trump's a fascist, stuff like that too. Also, those people look to him as him, oh, look, is this authoritative expert on the subject telling us what to do, and it gave people comfort, right? But when it comes to Fauci, I think the reason that he has the following he even has in the first place is if you do talk to people left of center and beyond, they do think he's like the super genius expert leader on this whole thing, right? You had Kamal up there in debates like, oh, whatever Fauci says, we'll do.
It's funny, sorry, because from the very beginning, he blew it from the very beginning. So
Well,
it is what it is.
I know it is what it is, but I'm talking about the majority of people that are not like us. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about the apolitical people, the normal day people, to include a lot of the leftists who said that, Trump's a fascist and he should do this. And that's still a huge, if you're taking basically all these apolitical people and the left, that's a huge proportion of the country, right? So if you take those people, the way they see it, right, to him, he was a person of comfort, and he was a person of authority, and giving them the no BS facts or whatever, and they liked that, and they still like it. But my main point is he is a product and a symbol of what the left believe in terms of how society should be set up in a technocratic fashion, right? Because they all believe in technocrats, like experts should be in charge, and the thing is, when you look at the huge government bureaucracy, it's made up of a lot of people that believe in the power of the government. You know what I'm saying? Like they, you know what I mean? Like they're basically leftists that got into government so they could tell people what to do. You know what I'm
And
saying?
it's funny too
And
because
I don't mean on a military sense. I mean like in a civilian sense. Like when it comes to policy and programs, like the EPA, you name it, doesn't matter. And a lot, and what I've seen personally, and there's more anecdotal, but I've seen a lot of people of that mind frame, that leftist mind frame of like authority from the government, power of the state. They are in the medical field. I've seen it. Right, a lot of those people are in the medical field. All right, there's a huge leftist, mindset of that. What I'm talking about in the medical field, and now you have him, who's been a government bureaucrat for like 40 years and rose to the highest levels in that realm, right? And what I'm saying is that's why he has a following that he does have from all those other people, right? They look up to him because he is a product of that. He is a symbolism of that. He is a symbolism of, a technocrat who's an expert, and he's in this high government post that he's worked his whole life in, and those are the type of people we should listen to, and that's why he's there.
It's a product of the bureaucracy.
Yeah, he's a product of the bureaucracy. Now, my criticism of Trump, right? Like I said, Trump's not a perfect person, and one of my criticisms of him is why does he not fire? Well, one is somebody has some really bad appointments, right? That it took him forever to fire those people.
Awful appointments.
Some very horrible ones. And then here's when he didn't appoint this person, but why does he keep him around? And why did he'll sit there and he's called him an idiot recently, but at the same time he says he's a good person. I don't think he's a good person. You know what I mean?
No, because it's very hard to fire these people, these bureaucrats. It's hard to fire anybody in Washington, D.C. Luckily, I know the president did sign an executive order recently that may make that a little easier to do now. We might be able to get rid of some of these people.
Yeah, well, I hope he gets rid of him.
He has to. I think if he wins, I think Fauci's probably going to end up retiring because, I mean, again, you're right. I completely understand where you're coming from because if you look anywhere, like if you were to go on, cable news, any cable news station, pick your poison. There's always, they always have a guest, and the guest is always some sort of expert, some kind of expert at something and nobody's even heard of this person. Like, who the hell is this? Why are they an expert? Why do we need to care what they're saying? We don't know who this is. They could be doing anything. And I think the issue is, especially the problem, particularly with Fauci, is that when the left adores science. It's all about science, and yes, science is absolutely important. We need to advance science. We need to advance medicine, absolutely. But we can't have politically motivated partisans in top scientific positions.
Absolutely.
Because all that does is ruin that progress. Because that when you throw politics into anything, it gets ruined.
I agree. I totally agree. But the thing is, I will push back on a little bit of what you just said. I 100% agree on that. Partisan people of the left or right or whatever in any kind of scientific position of authority. But I think the coronavirus and this pandemic, this whatever it is, has shown to anybody paying attention that the left is not about science.
No, they're not. It's only only when it benefits them.
Yeah, only when it benefits them. Only when
exactly. If you want to talk about, for example, gender or any issue like
climate change,
they throw away the science on that unless it's data that supports their claim.
Exactly. And I'm not even saying the right doesn't do that either, because people do that. People do that.
Like I said, whenever you throw politics into anything, it gets ruined.
It does.
You can't. And something like science, science is all about having an hypothesis and experimenting and coming to a conclusion. It's not about what should people think about this. It should be what is. This is what we experimented in. This is what we discovered. Here's the facts.
Exactly.
But unfortunately, again, coronavirus, unfortunately, is a great example of this. It's been politicized beyond belief because it happened during an election year.
Exactly.
And so now that's why I believe Fauci's lost all his credibility, because now he's out there magically saying, that Trump did a terrible job, even though, Trump basically did everything that Fauci recommended at the beginning. He shut down the borders. He ordered the lockdowns. All of those were he didn't order the lock. He suggested the lockdowns. 15 days to flatten the curve.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, uh,
So I just want to make.
all these ideas were. I mean, these are all recommendations from Fauci. So if he's criticizing, Trump's response to this, he should be looking himself in the mirror because
Absolutely.
they were all his ideas.
And so we're at the 90-minute point, so I think we should wrap this up. But I just want to throw out there real quick. He did at the very beginning as well, went on TV, multiple stations, and said that it's just going to be a mild flu or whatever. So it's going to be a bad flu.
Yeah, he even said, sorry to interrupt again, he even said, oh, I don't think anybody needs to wear a mask.
That was my next point.
That's going over the edge. We don't need to be doing that.
Yeah, well, that was my next point.
Yeah, he's been literally wrong in all over the place on every single thing on this virus, and he's looked like anything but an expert.
I agree with you, and my final point on this before we move on is I do think if he gets fired, though, as sad to say this, but it'll probably give him even more of incentive because now he'll be a private citizen. He'll be out there in the media spouting.
Well, he'll get a job at CNN.
Oh yeah.
CNN's medical expert, another expert.
Yeah. All right. Well, one point on that, real quick, is the media think they're experts, right? This technocracy. They're the technocrats of their field. They're the experts of the media, which you see how that's worked out. But so with all this being said, let's go ahead and close up this. It's been over 90 minutes. We've said a lot. Is there any last minute things you want to say before we sign off?
Oh, I hope if you listened, I hope you enjoyed today's subject matter, whether you agreed with it or not. Maybe it made your blood boil a little bit. Maybe it didn't. Maybe you were like, right on. But either way, this is all just to facilitate a discussion and have a good debate. And we welcome anybody who listened to this. We'd love for you to reach out to us and give us your thoughts and your feedback, and we hope that you enjoyed this today.
Good. I agree. So my last points too is same thing. Please provide some feedback. I hope you enjoyed it. This was just a test run, so we did have some technical issues. Hopefully you bared with us. I apologize about anything that may have kind of turned you off. Hopefully you stayed with us. And I really appreciate you guys for listening, taking the time in your day to check us out. Thank you, Blake, for doing this with me. And
thank you.
And yeah, so that's all I really got. This is Aaron Burr and with Blake Lincoln, and you are listening to the Free Thought Project.
Have a good night, everybody.
Have a good night.